Of all the great musical performers of the 20th century, no one epitomized grace, elegance, and charm like Fred Astaire. From his beginnings on the stage co-starring with his sister Adele, to his 25 years as the screen's most prolific and celebrated musical star, Astaire not only set the standard for the art of dance and musical performance, but constantly raised it to levels no one had ever thought possible. Fred made 29 films between 1933 and 1957, most of them box office hits, and each of them possessing a touch of genius that only could have been inspired by him. Of course, Fred had great collaborators who contributed significantly to his success. From legendary songwriters like Irving Berlin, Cole Porter, Jerome Kern, Dorothy Fields, and the Gershwins, to hugely gifted dance partners such as Sid Charisse, Rita Hayworth, Vera Ellen, and of course, Ginger Rogers. But it was Fred's own special form of magic which elevated his films to the highest form of art. My fascination with Fred Astaire began as a young boy when my parents took me to see the movie Top Hat at a revival house in Columbus, Ohio. From the first moment he took Ginger Rogers in his arms and danced with her, I was absolutely spellbound. He literally seemed to jump off the screen. And what struck me, even as a youth, was how easy he made it all look. His dancing appeared so natural, so casual. I was completely dazzled by it all then, and still am. Which brings me to another thing about Fred Astaire that I love, his singing. People tend to think of Fred primarily as a dancer, but his voice has always thrilled me just as much. Like his footwork, Fred's voice always seemed so unpretentious, yet deeply communicative. He had this gift of being able to seamlessly ease into a song, making the lyrics feel as if they were part of the dialogue.
No yens, no yearnings, no strings, no connections, no ties to my affections. I'm fancy-free and free for anything you fancy.
Ironically, Fred didn't think he was much of a singer. Here's a man who inspired some of the greatest songwriters of all time, yet he couldn't bear the sound of his own voice. Fred was a perfectionist in all things that he did. He would rehearse a musical number tirelessly for weeks on end until he felt it was good enough to shoot, as these rare home movies taken by George Gershwin on the set of Shall We Dance show. Fred expected everyone else to work just as hard. Fred made 9 beloved films with Ginger Rogers at RKO during the 1930s, beginning with Flying Down to Rio. Actually, Fred and Ginger weren't the main stars in that picture, but when they performed the karaoke, they literally stopped the show. Audiences went wild, and the studio immediately planned a starring vehicle to showcase the duo, the Gay Divorcee. Hit after hit followed, making the pair one of the biggest box office duos in the history of Hollywood. In 1937, Fred and Ginger starred in Shall We Dance, featuring one of the last scores composed by his close friend George Gershwin, who shortly after completing his work on the film, died tragically at age 38. The loss left Fred devastated, especially after learning that the last words spoken by Gershwin were his name.
The way you wear your hat, the way you sip your tea.
One number in that picture, They Can't Take That Away From Me, seemed to perfectly encapsulate the loss Fred was feeling.
Oh, no, they can't take that away from me. The way your smile.
The number was given short shrift in Shall We Dance, so 12 years later he reprised it, this time in Technicolor when he and Ginger reunited after a 10-year separation for the Barclays of Broadway.
No, no, they can't take that away from me.
After starring in the musical biopic, 1939's The Story of Vernon and Irene Castle, Ginger announced she was ending their partnership to pursue more dramatic roles, mirroring what had happened a few years earlier when his sister Adele announced her retirement.
I'll go my way by myself.
Fred was once again left without a partner and unsure of where his career was going. He needn't have worried. His talent and creative genius was about to launch him toward what would become the most innovative and successful years of his career. Fred moved to MGM, where his dancing style departed from what he referred to as hoofing to a more balletic style. He teamed up with visually innovative directors like Vincent Minnelli and Charles Walters. His dancing partners became even more diverse as well, including Lucille Bremer, Sid Charisse, Vera Ellen, and Jane Powell. Around this time, Fred spoke of retiring, but when friend and colleague Gene Kelly broke his ankle, Fred graciously stepped in to co-star with Judy Garland in Irving Berlin's Easter Parade, which was a smashing success. MGM quickly readied another vehicle for the two, but Garland had to bow out, and MGM cannily reunited Fred and Ginger Rogers for the Barclays of Broadway. Astaire was always interested in the newest cinematic innovations and loved integrating special effects into his dance numbers, being one reason he was so well-suited to film. In the Shoes with Wings On number from the Barclays of Broadway, he shared the screen with a chorus of animated shoes. In Royal Wedding, he danced up the walls and across the ceiling. And in The Belle of New York, he literally danced on air. He also choreographed his dance numbers for long tracking shots, so there wouldn't be many camera cuts, giving his film work the feel of a live performance. With all of that, he never allowed technology to compromise the essence of what a dance number was about. It was the humanity that was most important. But for me, Fred was at his best in a simple setting, like Central Park, with a perfect partner like Sid Charisse dancing in the dark. That's from The Bandwagon, and it just so happens to be my favorite film musical. After filming Silk Stockings in 1957, and with movie musicals becoming less popular, Fred decided it was time to focus on other things. Television and an occasional role in a film occupied his professional time. He was never one to look backwards and always lived in the present. One night I was playing piano at a party, and Ginger Rogers, with whom I had become friends, came over to me and asked, "Have you met Fred?" I replied, "No." So she said, "Come on." I was a bit tongue-tied, and he, being a very shy man, seemed a little perplexed at my reaction. I was rehearsing a Gershwin celebration with Liza Minnelli when we heard Fred had died, and I remember how hard it hit us, especially since that day we had been singing several Gershwin songs Fred had made famous.
And through foggy London town the sun was shining everywhere.
It was a great shock. Fred Astaire will always hold a special place in my heart, not only because of all the joy he's given me through his work, but also because he's had such a strong musical influence on my career. That's why I think of him every day. He was, and always will be, in a class by himself. For Turner Classic Movies, I'm Michael Feinstein.
Star of the Month, Fred Astaire. Wednesdays this month on Turner Classic Movies.